On a December morning in 1917, an explosion in the harbour of Halifax, Nova Scotia, picked up one of a ship's cannon barrels, half a ton of solid iron, and threw it more than 5 kilometers across the city. The metal came down partly melted by the heat of the trip. Whatever could do that was the largest explosion human beings had ever made, and nothing would surpass it until the atomic bomb. Nearly 2,000 people died in under a second. And the thing that set it off was a collision so slow and so gentle that nobody on either ship was hurt when they touched. There is a clock on the front of Halifax City Hall, and it is wrong on purpose. It reads 4 minutes and 35 seconds past 9, and it has read that, since 1917, frozen at the instant the harbour below became a bomb. This is the story of how a fender bender became a bomb. How a whole city stood at its windows and watched the fuse burn for 20 minutes without knowing it was a fuse. And what it cost the one man who understood the danger in time to do something about it. Halifax in December of 1917 was a city running hot. The war had turned a quiet Canadian port into one of the busiest harbours anywhere, the gathering point where troop ships and supply convoys assembled before the crossing to Europe, all of it tucked safely behind submarine nets strung across the harbour mouth. The population had pushed past 60,000. Every pier was working. The tightest stretch of that harbour is a channel called the Narrows, and on that particular morning 2 ships were set to pass through it at the same time. One was the Emo, a Norwegian steamer chartered to carry relief supplies to occupied Belgium. She had Belgian relief painted in enormous letters down her hull, so no German submarine would mistake her for a target. She was behind schedule, outbound, moving faster than the harbour rules allowed and drifting over onto the wrong side of the channel. Coming the other way was the Mont Blanc, a French freighter inbound from New York, waiting her turn to join a convoy. She was not an ordinary ship. Her holds were packed with about 900 tons of high explosive, most of it picric acid, a compound volatile enough that a hard enough jolt can set it off by itself. There was TNT down there too, and gun cotton. And because the holds were full, the crew had stacked metal drums of benzol, a fuel that ignites from a spark, on the open deck. She was a floating bomb, and her crew knew it. They had spent the whole Atlantic crossing dreading a single stray spark. Now, here is the part that matters most, and it is a small thing. The Mont Blanc flew no flag warning anyone what she carried. The red flag that would have told every vessel in the harbour to give her a wide berth would also have told any lurking U-boat exactly what kind of prize was sitting in the Narrows. So she ran anonymous, just another freighter, and a bomb drifted toward the waterfront of a city of 60,000 people who had no idea it was there. What happened next took only a few minutes, and each one made things worse. The ships saw each other and did what ships do. They blew their whistles to signal who would go where, and they got it wrong. The Emo was coming down the wrong side of the channel. The Mont Blanc cut toward shore to get out of the way. Then the Emo threw her engines into reverse at exactly the wrong instant, and that swung her bow around and into the Mont Blanc's side. Her prow opened a gash in the hull of the most dangerous ship in the Atlantic at about the speed of a walking man. The collision itself barely registered. A dent, a tear in the plating, nobody knocked off their feet. On any other ship it would have meant an exchange of furious signals and an insurance claim. But the impact toppled those benzol drums on the deck. The fuel ran, found a spark, and caught. Within seconds, the Mont Blanc's foredeck was burning directly over a hold that could erase a neighborhood. The crew understood in an instant what was coming. They understood just as fast that there was nothing they could do about it. They couldn't fight a fire like that, and they couldn't shout loud enough or fast enough to matter. So they put the lifeboats down and rowed for the Dartmouth shore as hard as they could pull, yelling in French that the ship was going to blow. The handful of people who heard them didn't speak the language. The ones who did would not have believed it. The Mont Blanc, abandoned and burning, drifted across the harbour on the tide and nestled up against Pier 6 on the Halifax waterfront. The pier caught. The flames climbed the pilings, and the city came down to watch. A ship on fire in the harbour was a show after all. Black smoke and bright bursts of colour as the benzol drums went up like Roman candles, the whole thing unfolding on a clear, mild morning. Dock workers stopped to look. Clerks crowded to office windows for a better view. Children dawdled on their way to school. In the houses of Richmond, the closest neighbourhood, families pressed up to the glass to watch the pretty fire down on the water. For 20 minutes, the most dangerous place to stand in Halifax was anywhere you could see the ship. At 5 seconds past 9:04, the fire reached the cargo. The Mont Blanc didn't break apart so much as cease to exist. 2,900 tons of explosive went off at once and turned the ship into a cloud of iron vapor under a column of smoke that climbed 2 miles into the sky. The energy came to roughly 3,000 tons of TNT, a number nothing would touch until a very different kind of weapon fell on Japan 28 years later. That figure is hard to feel, so try these instead. The ship's anchor shank weighed over 1,000 pounds. The blast threw it almost 4 kilometers across the length of the city and into the ground on the far side. You can go see it. It sits today on a small pedestal in a quiet residential neighborhood, and people park their cars beside it. In the other direction, one of the ship's cannon barrels came down more than 5 kilometers away, its metal partly melted by the heat it had traveled through. The pressure wave moved out from the ship faster than sound. In Richmond, it didn't damage the buildings. It removed them, snapping trees and bending the iron rails of the rail yard and throwing people against whatever was behind them. Every pane of glass in the city blew inward in the same instant. That is why so many of the 9,000 wounded were cut and why so many lost their eyes. They had been watching through the windows. Then the water came back. The heat had been fierce enough to boil the harbour dry beneath the ship for a moment, bearing the mud of the seafloor. When the sea rushed back into that empty space, it stood up into a wave nearly 20 meters high. The wall of water climbed the shore, threw boats up onto the land, and pulled people off the piers and out into the harbour. On the far side, it swept away a Mi'kmaq community that had lived on that shore for generations. People heard the blast on Prince Edward Island, more than 200 kilometers off. Windows cracked 60 miles away. In about 6 seconds, the entire north end of a city was gone. Go back 30 seconds to while the ship is still burning at Pier 6 and the crowd is still gathering. A few hundred feet from that pier, there is a small wooden building in the middle of the rail yards, and inside it sits a man named Vince Coleman. He is 45, a train dispatcher, and his job is to move the freight and passenger trains in and out of the busiest wartime port in the country. He left his house on Russell Street that morning the same as any other, past his wife Frances and their 2-year-old Eileen, who was wearing a blue dress Frances had made for her. A sailor off the Mont Blanc comes pounding through the door. He has rowed ashore and he is finally shouting the warning to someone who can use it. The burning ship is full of munitions. It is going to go up. Get out. Coleman and his boss start for the door. Then Coleman stops because he has remembered a train. Number 10, the overnight passenger train up from St. John, hundreds of people aboard, is due any minute. It runs on the line right along the water, right past the burning ship. Coleman turns around and goes back to the telegraph key. and with the fire eating its way toward 900 tons of explosive a few hundred feet away, he taps out a message down the line to every station that will hear it. Hold up the train. Ammunition ship afire in harbor making for Pier 6 and will explode. Guess this will be my last message. Goodbye, boys. A man with a clear path to the door turned around and went back. He sent the warning without knowing whether a single soul would catch it, and he died before he could ever find out whether it worked. His widow got two things back: his watch and the telegraph key. He was still working when it ended. The morning after the largest explosion in human history, it began to snow. The worst blizzard in years dropped more than a foot on a city that no longer had walls to hold the weather out. 25,000 people had no windows left. Many had no homes at all. The rescuers who had been pulling survivors out of collapsed cellars now had to dig through snow to reach them, and some of the people trapped in the wreckage froze before anyone could. Help came anyway, and it came from a city that owed Halifax nothing. Boston got the news by telegraph 400 miles to the south and didn't wait to be asked twice. A relief train was loaded with doctors and nurses and supplies and sent north into the same storm, fighting the snow the whole way up. It reached Halifax to find local medical staff who had been on their feet without sleep since the blast, and it took the weight off them. Halifax has never let go of that. Every year since, Nova Scotia cuts a tall spruce and ships it to Boston, where it stands lit on Boston Common through Christmas. The tree has been arriving for more than a century now, a standing thank you for one terrible week. That is the warmer half of what the explosion left behind. The other half is colder. For a while, the Halifax blast was simply the most powerful explosion anyone had ever measured, and that made it useful. When the physicists building the atomic bomb needed to understand what a single explosion does to a real city with real streets and real buildings full of real people, they had almost nothing to go on. The world had never seen a man-made blast on that scale except once. So they studied Halifax. Robert Oppenheimer and his colleagues looked back at that December morning to help estimate what their weapon would do to a city. For nearly 30 years, it was the closest thing to the real event that existed. Which brings it back to the clock. The city could fix it any time it wanted to. It chooses not to and leaves the hands at 9:04 and 35 seconds. A collision nobody got hurt in. A fire a whole city came down to watch. And a man at a telegraph key tapping out goodbye to strangers, hoping it would be enough to matter.